Good afternoon and welcome to the Caregiver Teleconnection. My name is Glenda Rogers and I'm going to be your facilitator for today's session. Today we are going to talk about the ABCs of frontotemporal dementias with Dr. Tam Cummings, and we're so glad she's with us today. But before I introduce Tam, I want to introduce Candace Ramos, and she's with Vitas Healthcare, and they are our sponsor today, and we're so thankful that they are with us. Candace, tell us a little bit about Vitas.
Thank you, Glenda. Excited to be here and excited for all of you guys to hear Tam's session today. At Vitas Healthcare, we care for hospice patients wherever they call home. Our interdisciplinary teams include a nurse, physician, an aide, social worker, and chaplain who come together to create personalized care plans to ensure that patients' comfort, dignity, and quality of life. Vitas offers key services that support patients receiving hospice care at home as well as their families. Our telecare clinicians are available via phone 24/7, 365 to answer questions and dispatch a team member to their bedside if necessary. Medical equipment and medications are delivered to the home too. And respite care provides up to 5 days of Medicare certified inpatient care for a hospice patient so family members can take a break from caregiving duties. Vitas currently provides hospice care in 14 states, including California, Florida, and Washington, D.C., to name a few. In Texas, we have hospice service areas in San Antonio, Austin, Houston, Dallas, and Fort Worth. Find out more, call Vitas Healthcare at 1-800-723-3233 or visit www.vitas.com for information and support from the nation's leading provider of end-of-life care. Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you, Candace, and thank you, Vitas, for your sponsorship. So let me tell you just a little bit about Dr. Cummings before we get started here. Dr. Tam Cummings founded her company in 2009 with the mission to inspire, educate, and empower dementia caregivers. Now her professional gerontological practice in the Texas Hill Country is recognized as one of the leading educators of dementia caregivers and program design for dementia care nationally. Tam, welcome to the session today.
Thank you, Glenda. Thank you, WellMed. Thank you, Vitas, for being our sponsor today. Glenda, this is going to be a quick session. This is a lot of information, and using the website that you're going to give people and using the staging tool will help families understand and figure out how advanced their person is. Using the website for the frontotemporal dementias will help you actually figure out which one it is. A lot of times when I meet families, they've only been told their person has FTD and they are completely unprepared for there are multiple categories of frontotemporal dementia, the behavior dementias, the communication dementias, and the movement and motor dysfunction dementias. Many people are surprised to find Alzheimer's is a first cousin of the FTDs. So when we see frontotemporal dementia, it's not unusual that Alzheimer's will eventually join it. And one of the things to remember as we get started is this is considered the dementia of a younger person, a person who might be in their 20s or their 30s or their 40s or their 50s. And remember, the younger you are with any dementia, the more aggressive the dementia is. And so I don't mean a 20-year-old person who lives to be 60. I mean a 20-year-old person who would die in their 20s. So it is considered a very aggressive dementia. This group of dementias was discovered by Dr. Arnold Pick in the 1880s. And this is who they were ultimately where the first look at this disease came from. Pick's dementia was the dementia that was named for Dr. Pick. That dementia has now been pulled securely under the behavioral variant FTD umbrella of the frontotemporal dementia behavioral group. But you can still see some differentiations on your staging tool because your staging tool lists both behavioral variant and Pick's dementia. It gives you a chance to see the difference between the two. Now, this is the breakdown of the frontotemporal dementias. So, Glenda, it's not that a person has FTD, it's which FTD do they have, because the type of FTD your loved one has determines where they're going to be cared for, and it determines what type of medications will be used with them. So The breakdown of the FTDs is the behavioral forms, and that is behavioral variant FTD and PICS dementia. Behavioral variant FTD is written as small b, small v, capital F, capital T, capital D. And this dementia, Glenda, is frequently misdiagnosed as alcoholism on average 2 or 3 times before the right set of doctors get involved and realize they're actually dealing with a brain damage. And that's because one of the early features of behavioral variant FTD is this person suddenly begins to drink massive amounts of alcohol when in the past that was not the norm for them. The next set of the frontotemporal dementias are the communication disorders. So primary progressive PPA, or primary progressive aphasia, which is also called PPA, and even has a separate website for this. So the website for the PPAs by themselves, Glenda, is ppa.org. So ppa.org. There are 3 forms that have been identified: non-fluent agrammatic variant PPA, semantic dementia PPA, and logopenic variant PPA. And when we look at brain slides, you'll see that different areas of the temporal lobes are being attacked by these primary progressive aphasias, and it is very dramatic, the different areas that are attacked. And so on a CAT scan or MRI, this is a very, this is not a difficult dementia for doctors to diagnose because of where that damage is occurring, and it's so specific. Then you have the movement disorder FTDs, and that is progressive supranuclear palsy. Cortical basal degeneration CBD is how it's known, and FTD with ALS or FTD motor neuron disease. And FTD with ALS has just recently been pulled into the FTD motor neuron disease category. And then any of the FTDs can have Alzheimer's join. We don't understand this. They're just considered first cousins of one another. And so it's not unusual that as a family, you may be dealing with more than one form of dementia. And the first form is the FTD. The second form may be the Alzheimer's. Additionally, Glenda, something unique about the FTDs is that some of the FTDs only appear if another FTD is already in place. So we see number 7, corticobasal degeneration dementia, come into play if one of the other FTDs is in place. And this is a very unusual dementia. And one of the hallmark features, Glenda, is the person is unaware of the left side of their body, but will continue to try to stand and move. And how in the world do you stand when you only have one leg and one side of your body? So there's some interesting behaviors that happen with these dementias, and it's all due to what part of the brain is being damaged. So big tips for all caregivers, professional and family: you have to slow down your speech. You are talking much too quickly. Now, Glenda and I are in Texas. Tina's in Texas. Our friend at WellMed is at Vitas. She's also down here in Texas. We talk slower than other parts of the country. We have to slow down. All of us have to slow down our speech when we're talking with people with dementia, especially people with frontotemporal dementias, because this dementia is telling you the frontal lobes and the temporal lobes are what are being destroyed. You have to remember that words don't make sense now, okay? Words themselves don't make sense. And the world is becoming a scarier and scarier place because words don't make sense, and the things that are going on around a person don't make sense. So the world doesn't look right, movement is not right, sound is not right, and language is not right. Does that make sense, Glenda?
Yes, sadly so.
Okay, so their world is becoming a very scary place for them, okay? Now, one of the things that I hear from families is that they say, when we explain that in stage 4, late stage 4, stage 5, your person should now be in memory care, because this is a medical disease. This isn't, oh, you're a bad person. This is, they now need medical care. Families will go into a memory care community and come out and say, my person doesn't look like that. And the reality is, yes, they do. It's just that in memory care, you're seeing stage 5, stage 6, and stage 7. And if your person is stage 5, they don't quite look sick yet. If they're stage 6, they very much look sick. And if they're stage 7, they're bedbound. And people with FTD age dramatically. The lady may have been 59 years old, and when she dies at 61, she will look like she's 89 years old. It does a tremendous aging to the person who has the dementia. We don't understand that. We just know that it happens. But go back and look at your loved one over the last decade. And what you'll discover is when you look at the face of your spouse and you smiling together at the party, when you blow the faces up, much, much bigger than the normal size, but blow them up on your phone, look at what your face looks like and all the emotion in it, and that you're actually smiling. And then look at your loved one's picture and realize that their eyes were flat, their affect or emotion on their face was beginning to flatten, and they weren't really smiling. And that's what you'll begin to notice. And as you look at the progression of your loved one's face over the last 10 years to today, it helps you to begin to realize that you really have been doing care a decade, and your loved one really is ill. And your loved one does look like the other people in dementia care. Now, these areas are telling you where different frontotemporal dementias are occurring. And you can see, Glenda, that there is a specific and very remarkable difference as to where the brain is being damaged. And that difference allows a physician to very quickly make a determination, plus the way the person begins to behave, eat food, use or stop using language or movement, all tell the doctor and the family which dementia they're dealing with. When the family goes to the FTD website, as you click on what is FTD, families simply read through the clinical features of each one of the FTDs and will immediately point and say, this is my person right here, because their behaviors are so distinctive. As a general rule, this person doesn't look at all like Alzheimer's. And this person is typically in their late 50s. In the 50s, Glenda, 50s and 60s is when we really begin to make our most money. That's when we really begin to build that nest egg for retirement. That's when people have reached the higher levels of the business that they're in. And so families are unprepared for this sudden stoppage of work. And most people I know in their 50s have not bought long-term care insurance. So this is especially challenging for families. As a general rule of thumb, to make a distinction between is it Alzheimer's or is it FTD, if the person is younger than the age of 60, my first thought is supposed to be this is a frontotemporal dementia, because it's much more likely to be that than early onset Alzheimer's. And one of the quick ways to tell is people with Alzheimer's don't know who, what, where, when, why, or how, but they have all of the emotions. People with FTD, because so much damage is occurring here where the emotions are, they do know who, what, where, when, why, and how. They just don't have any emotion about it. And the person with FTD, their hippocampus is still functioning much longer than the Alzheimer's person, so they will appear different than the other person and than a person with Alzheimer's dementia. And the other thing is, for the families, we have to really reach out as professionals to give them support, because these are not 70-year-old adult children. These folks typically have teenagers as children or young adults as children. So there's a lot of support needed. Plus, the spouse never in their life imagined they were going to be widowed in their 50s due to a dementia. So it's a very emotional dementia, and it requires a lot of support from us as professionals to help this family. For some people, that loss of emotion, that we see in people with frontotemporal dementia, it's occurring because of brain damage. But Glenda, when you and I look at a person who gets much too close to us, only a few inches away instead of 3 feet, and that person speaks with no emotion in their eyes, in their face, or in their voice, your instinct is that this is a dangerous person. And it's scary. And it scares caregivers. It actually makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up because your instinct is this is a dangerous person. And they're not dangerous. They just have very significant brain damage in the area of the brain that controls emotion. The decline that the family witnesses, the decline that the staff witnesses is devastating, and it does take a toll on professional staff. We're accustomed to dealing with people in their 80s and their 90s and their 70s. They've lived a life, their grandparents, their great grandparents. When we're dealing with somebody in their 50s, it takes a very big emotional toll on the staff because that's too close to my own age. For our younger staff, that's the age of a mother, not a grandmother. And so it begins to take a toll on everybody around. Because of the lack of emotion, family members, the family may have divorced because the spouse thought this person doesn't love me or the children anymore. And so a lot of times we see people with behavioral variant FTD and PICS dementia already divorced because the spouse didn't realize it was brain damage. They thought no one loved me anymore. The person ages dramatically. And Glenda, I know that you have seen it because of your job. It shocks me every time I see it. This is shocking for families and for professional caregivers, but this disease dramatically ages your loved one, and that's a hard thing. Okay. Now, these are the lobes of the brain, and each of these lobes is responsible for certain things. This dementia is a frontotemporal dementias. So it's telling you in the name, it is mainly destroying the frontal lobes and the temporal lobes, but it also infects, impairs, and damages all of the other lobes as well. And in this dementia, the hippocampus, the area of the brain that lets you and I make new memory, in people with FTD, that isn't damaged until much later in the disease process. And so because of that, they still know who, what, where, when, why, and how. They just don't care. And that is so much different than the person with Alzheimer's, because one of the first things that they're going to learn, or that the family is going to notice, is that loss of ability to know who, what, why, when, where, or how. Is that making sense?
Yes.
Okay. So when this disease hits the frontal lobes are speech, facial recognition, rational thought, personality, judgment, memory, imagination. It is what makes you, you, and me. And when this part of the brain becomes damaged, then the person begins to have unique and often inappropriate behaviors. A lot of times people with behavioral variant dementia aren't diagnosed until they get picked up for shoplifting. And this is a person that never broke the law in their life, but because of damage here, they don't remember that they're supposed to stop and pay for something because that file doesn't exist anymore. So they go in a store, pick something up and leave with it. They go in a store, open a bottle of alcohol, drink it, set it down and go to leave. That gets you arrested. So when this lobe gets damaged, the family sees personality changes, social rule changes. A frontotemporal behavioral variant person, Glenda, one of the ways to spot them is they come up and they're this close to you. They're only an inch or two away from your body space versus 3 feet, and they're not aware of it. Their affect is flat, their voice is flat, there's no emotion here. When the frontal lobe is damaged, you have massive mood swings, and it's difficult to get the person from angry back to happy. And remember, dementia people pick up on our behavior, our emotions. So if we come to work angry, we can make everybody in the building angry. The frontal lobe, once it's damaged, this person is easily distracted. This is literally squirrel. They can't hold the thought in their brain because that's the piece of the brain that does that, and it's gone. They can't do things in order. The sequencing is lost. So they may come out of their room dressed inappropriately. They got halfway shaved, but they forgot to put on shaving cream. They are doing things out of sequence, as they lose the ability to do that thing in and of itself. Judgment's impaired. So they go into a store and take something and don't pay for it. They do things that are not appropriate and not normal for this person, all because of brain damage. Difficulty finding the right word. Remember, this is language, but this is speech. And so an Alzheimer's person, Glenda, may tell me that she can hear water running, and she may be trying to tell me she needs to go to the bathroom, or she may be telling me she needs a drink, or it may be raining, or there could water be running. Okay, she's in the right file. But in this one, they're beginning to have more and more trouble doing that because there is such massive damage that occurs, especially on the right side of the brain. They have difficulty with abstract reasoning. I come in and I've got on a raincoat and an umbrella and it's dripping wet. You would be able to infer that it's raining outside, and they would have trouble with that. There's a loss of impulse control. If they think it, they say it. And this tends to be more sexual things that would be being said if it's behavioral variant FTD. And unable to comprehend laws. And that's what's so horrifying for the family, because this person's never broken a law in their life. And then this is one of those words I can't say, Glenda, but it means repeating actions or words. And this is something we see frequently in people with dementia. We see them moving, changing, shaking. You might see them clapping. You might see them rocking. You might see them saying the same word over and over and over again. And it's a normal behavior that indicates there is brain damage in the, wow, I did something and it made everything pop up on here. And that's why you see those behaviors on into a later part of the disease. Okay. Now the temporal lobes. This is hearing, facial recognition, language. Remember, Glenda, the left side's formal language, how we're talking to yourself. The right side is singing, cursing, automatic yes, no, ugly words, forbidden words, and this side typically dies first in Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. But in these communication dementias, the PPAs of FTD, where the disease starts in the temporal lobe determines how the person stops using language. So based on where the damage begins, that tells us which form of the FTD the person is, which form of the primary progressive aphasia the person has, because where the disease starts in the temporal lobe determines how the person uses language. So the person may begin to use a whole lot of words to describe a word. So instead of kitty cat, it might be the fuzzy, purry, drinks milk, and they're using a whole lot of words to describe a word. Or they begin to have trouble using nouns, or they begin to use gibberish and bits and pieces of words. And eventually all of the people with PPA will be mute as well. And that is especially scary for families, but you have to go back to, it's even hard to go back to tone and pitch of voice, but you have to go back to a smiling face and body language. And that's what most of our communication is done with anyway. Does that make sense, Glenda?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Okay. Once these lobes become damaged, though, the person is challenged to remember faces and names. And it's not you and me, Glenda, it's the faces and names of their family. And this, again, can make the family think this person doesn't love me. And it's not that, it's brain damage. They have difficulty understanding words, identifying or verbalizing objects. And so family members may get mad because I keep telling you to pick up the remote, Glenda. And what I don't understand is you're not understanding what the word remote means. You don't understand clicker, you don't understand TV, you don't know the names of these things anymore. So it's as though the person is suddenly thrust into a world where they're speaking it literally, we're speaking a different language. Concentration is impaired. You begin to see short-term memory loss, eventually long-term memory loss, a change in sexual interest. So there can be a boost of testosterone in both males and females, and the person might get very grabby, touchy, or there can be a drop in estrogen and testosterone in both males and females, and the person has no sexual interest. There can be persistent talking that can be nonsensical, saying the same things over and over again, saying a whole conversation over and over again. Eventually, there is no talking. They become challenged to see objects right in front of them, even though the occipital lobes control vision. So we don't understand that structural connection between the temporal lobe, the eyes, and the occipital lobe. We just know that they don't see the clicker, they don't see the cup of coffee, they don't see you. It's not unusual to see somebody with frontotemporal dementia run right over another resident, and the other resident get up off the floor really angry, and the FTD person didn't actually see that there was somebody in front of them. They were just moving forward. They can't categorize objects. And then seizure disorders, when doctors talk about seizures, if they're not using the words grand mal, petit mal, that type of seizure, seizure also means stroke activity. They can have arias, and that's where they see lights. They might see lights and colors around them that they will describe to you. And strange reveries, Glenda, that's when we're caught in a daydream. And so something that might seem like a hallucination to you is actually a reverie, and the person is just describing a daydream that that literally are stuck in. So for families, you have to remember this, nothing is being done on purpose. Their brains are literally dying. It's just that they don't look sick until the disease is very, very advanced. And in this slide, what you're seeing is based on the type of dementia the person has, it clearly is showing you from the scans, this is where the brain will be damaged, and this is what the brain will look like, okay? Eventually, the hippocampus will become damaged, and the person will then lose cognition, okay? So in this slide, I have to move my little thing here so I can see better. So where you see the blue, this would be primary progressive aphasia, non-fluent variant agrammatic, okay? And that is the front horn of the temporal lobe. Semantic variant primary progressive aphasia, you can see in red, is the middle horn of the temporal lobe, and you'll notice it doesn't attack equally on both sides, but it is in both sides. And then logopenic variant, the third form and the much rarer form, you will notice is attacking the left side at the back horn of the temporal lobe. So it's very clear to the physician, to the neurologist, when they're looking at the CAT scans and the MRIs of your loved one. And if they're listening to how your loved one is speaking, if you look up how your loved one is speaking, then you can come right back to this slide and go, this is how they're speaking. These are the areas of this is the area of their brain that's damaged. Does that make sense, Glenda?
Mm-hmm.
Depressing, I know.
It is. It is.
And these are, to me, these are the hardest ones. This is why they don't recognize boundaries. This is why they begin to drink or shoplift. Why they don't show emotion for their families or others. And this is a brain that is showing you the full effects of behavioral variant FTD. This is normal aging Alzheimer's, and then Pick's dementia. And remember, Pick's now falls under behavioral variant. And so you can see by doing the testing, this is a SPECT test, that the doctor is able to see where the damage has occurred. And what it is showing you on all that blue and black area on the Pick's one is there's no brain tissue there. Everything your loved one is doing is related to brain damage. It's just related to brain damage. So remember, throughout your day, stop and do your breathing. And if your loved one's already in a community, breathe this breath 4 times before you go into the community to visit. When you finish your visit, breathe 4 times in your car before you get back on the road. You breathe in to the count of 4, hold for the count of 2, and breathe out to the count of 6. As you begin to do this for longer and longer periods of time, not 4 breaths, but 8 breaths, then 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, you're actually doing breath meditation, which is the best thing in the world for your brain. This strengthens your brain. This strengthens the connectivity in your brain. This is the best brain exercise that we can give you. This does not work on people with dementia, though. So all you do is put your feet flat on the ground, hands up in your lap, shut your eyes, breathe in deeply, and always breathe through your nose, in and out of your nose, because otherwise you get a dry mouth. So you just do your breathing into the count of 4, hold for 2, breathe out to the count of 6. And that long out breath is what slows your breathing from 14 breaths per minute to 8. And once you slow your breathing down to 8 breaths per minute, Glenda, you're in prayer state or meditation state. Now, these are the behavioral FTDs. This is how it is written, and this is the most common form of FTD. And Pick's dementia is now thought of as a variation or just having a slightly different presentation. There's a loss of affect in the face and the voice and in the eyes. And Glenda, most of the time when I meet behavioral variant people, they have a guardian because the family has divorced them because the spouse didn't realize they weren't not in love with you anymore. They had a brain disease that was killing the area of the brain that holds emotion. There is a sudden interest in, or increase in drinking. And this is somebody who doesn't drink, Glenda, is now drinking enough to where they get put in rehab. There can be a fixation on a specific food that leads to a dramatic weight gain that occurs in only a few months. So there is a form of Alzheimer's that's a rare form of Alzheimer's. And one of the features of it is that the person is losing weight. It's cortical atrophy Alzheimer's. One of the clues of this dementia is that the person is gaining weight, and they gain weight rapidly, 20 to 40 pounds in 2 to 3 months from fixating on a food. I've known somebody who was eating 200 bananas a day, and that's all they ate. I knew somebody who ate sugar, and he would pour the sugar in a bowl, eat it like cereal or soup, and when he ran out of sugar, he'd get in his car, drive to the store, and buy more sugar. I knew somebody who was eating 20 Big Macs a day, and I knew somebody who was eating 5 gallons of Rocky Road ice cream a day. And so once we know what that food is, we can use that food to help get this person to do their ADLs. But it is normal. There's going to be a huge gain in weight, and it's not at all unusual, Glenda, that if I go into this house, the families actually had to put chains around the refrigerator and chains around the pantry to keep this person from eating constantly. There's repetitive movement and habits that can happen at certain times. So sort of like a sundowning feature, but it could happen at any time of the day. Severe and rapid cognitive decline is not unusual, but it happens late in stage 5 of the disease. And then language skills continue to function, but there's no emotion. And that again makes caregivers feel very agitated. You feel like you're in danger, and you're not. It's just where the brain is infected. They have mood swings, and again, it's hard to get the frontal lobe happy once it's unhappy. And for all of the FTDs, swallowing becomes a challenge as the disease progresses. This is a brain with FTD, and the frontal lobe is completely destroyed. The front horn of the temporal lobe is destroyed, and there's also damage through the other lobes. This is showing you how they can see as they look at these brains where the damage has occurred. And when they show you these things, it means there's no tissue left there, Glenda. Okay, the communication FTDs. You have primary progressive aphasia is the umbrella term for this. And under this comes semantic dementia, logopenic variant, and non-fluent agrammatic. And here's an odd thing, Glenda. All variations, this person can suddenly, in the middle of this disease, develop an ability to create art like Rembrandt. And it's an unusual thing that happens, and we don't understand it. We just know it happens in the communication FTDs. And I've always been fascinated by this, but it had never occurred to me a family would have this reaction. A family in Austin had children that lived outside of the state. And the children that lived outside of the state, who were not the children taking care of their mother, the children living outside of the state were certain that their mother was pretending she couldn't use words correctly because her children were not making a big enough deal about her newfound art hobby.
Oh my gosh.
And what they were witnessing and didn't realize was this very strange thing that happens in the PPAs as they progress through the dementia, this ability to do art, and it is not understood at all. But you can see that based on the type of dementia of the PPA that the person has, very real damage is occurring in that lobe specifically, but it's also occurring in all the lobes. It's just doing tremendous, devastating damage in those lobes. Okay, in semantic dementia, there is a failure to recognize nouns or common objects or faces of people, so not able to recall nouns. Speech is eventually very difficult to understand, and then sentences can't be formed. In the final stages, there begins to be more frontal lobe behavior, more behavior tied to that emotional damage. Swallowing is affected. This person can do their ADLs until late in the disease, which can make a family member think, I can still keep them at home, but the same rules apply. By stage 5, this person needs to be in a skilled facility or in memory care because they need medical care at this point. They can speak at a regular rate, but it's getting difficult to understand them, and they're eventually beginning to have that blunt feature of no emotion. Logopenic variant, primary progressive aphasia. Remember, it's only on that left side. This person has difficulty retrieving words. Now, Glenda, as I say that, I'm fully aware that every person on this call has forgotten a word today. That's normal brain function, okay? This is a slow speech pattern dotted with long pauses for word finding. Mutism is eventually present, as it is in all of the communication FTDs, and yet reading and writing abilities remain a bit longer, then they're eventually lost. And so things like being able to do math, being able to still read and write, but families don't understand that there's not that full comprehension there, can confuse families and make them think this person is pretending or playing like. When you do images, it shows that there's a loss of blood flow, blood volume, and neural activity in the brain. And this is also can be misdiagnosed as a very rare form of Alzheimer's called logopenic variant Alzheimer's. But that's very unusual because most physicians aren't aware of logopenic variant Alzheimer's, but it could be misdiagnosed as that. And this is what it looks like in the brain. So you see that eventually the ventricle area begins to balloon open, that little butterfly, and they then lose their hippocampus, and then there's always a good chance that Alzheimer's joins as well. In the non-fluent agrammatic variant, the ability to produce speech is lost and quickly deteriorates. Speech is hesitant, and then the person begins to talk around the missing words. So think about, how would I describe a kitty cat without using the word kitty cat? Speech is slow and it sounds breathy, weak, slurred, or nasal, which is also kind of a Parkinson's sound, okay? They can still do their ADLs, mutism happens, and then behavior and personality changes happen later in the disease, and that's true on most of these dementias. Motor and movement disorder dementias, these are cared for in skilled facilities. They are licensed to have a piece of equipment called the Hoyer lift, and they are more likely to have more staff members available throughout the night to lift and move a full-bodied person. This is actually the dementia that the singer Linda Ronstadt has been diagnosed with, and never once did they talk about that she has a dementia. So this is a very rare form of dementia. This is one of the movement disorders, and eventually this person can't move their body correctly, including chewing and swallowing food. There's a sudden decreased emotional response. And one of the ways that this is spotted is the person can't properly aim their eyes at an object. There's a lack of recognition of the need for personal hygiene. They begin to fall due to damage in the basal ganglia area and the limbic system, which is right above the hippocampus. But families can be fooled because this person can still do math until very late in the disease, even though there's a loss of executive function. Increased sleeping, swallowing challenges, as with all of the FTDs, a later onset of cognitive function loss, and then rapid muscle atrophy. And they struggle to form words as they become mute. And then this is what we mean by the changes in the eyes. The eyes can't quite focus correctly on an object. Okay, and then scans. Okay, cortical basal ganglionic. Their emotional changes, math skills are still good, don't recognize I need a bath, has great difficulty moving their body, and they have trouble with their skilled hand movement, which is our ability to do tiny little things like put on our glasses, operate a phone, lift a cup of coffee, fine muscle movement. Then slowed movement, they become short of breath due to weakened muscles. This doesn't mean they need PT. This is the progression of the disease due to brain damage. Eventually, they have muscle atrophy throughout their body, and then they become unaware of one side of their body. And so, Glenda, this is interesting to see. And if you see it, you'll now you know what it is. But they tend to be not aware of the left side, and so the left hand will come floating over here, and the right hand will then see it, grab it, slap it, and move it away. And if you bring the hand over and ask the person, do you recognize your wedding bands? Do you recognize your hands? They'll tell you, no, they don't recognize this. But they will continue to try to stand and continue to try to walk. And of course, they're going to go right down because they are unaware of one side of their body, which sounds very bizarre. I've been a gerontologist 32 years. I have seen this once. This is very, very rare. Difficulty with mood, loss of balance, either sitting or walking, great choking risk. And this is one of the FTDs that joins other FTDs. So the one time I've seen this on autopsy, the lady had 4 different forms of dementia. FTD with motor neuron disease is now going to be called FTD with motor neuron disease or ALS with FTD. And it just is, again, a dementia that's going to be very rapidly progressive. They're going to be cared for in a skilled facility because they're the ones who have the ability to take care of them. And in this one, the frontal lobes and the temporal lobes are dying, but also very early, the person's ability to use their body is lost, to be able to use their body mass and muscle movement is lost. And then when this adds in with ALS, there's also a great chance that Alzheimer's is going to join in as well. So when you see this, you see fine muscle twitches and cramps, loss of fine motor movement, shortness of breath as muscle systems begin to fail, exaggerated reflexes. So they try to reach for something, but they go way out, or a reflexive action that should make the finger go like this makes everything go up. Great choking hazard, as in all of these. Saliva can pool in the mouth as the throat. Brain no longer remembers how to swallow, so then drool may come out. So we put an apron on the front. Slow speech with breathy sounds until there is no speech, loss of affect or emotion, late loss of cognition, increased sleeping, decreased motor movement, muscle atrophy. They can freeze in a movement, and you can't try to correct and continue that movement for them. You can actually snap that bone. So you have to wait until that thing unfreezes, whatever that movement was. So deep breath, everybody. And 5 things for all of us to remember is that the person with dementia is not aware that their brain is damaged. Behaviors identify certain frontal temporal dementias. So those behaviors are clues to you to give the doctor. Also, go to the FTD website, go to the doctor and say, it's this one right here. FTD and Alzheimer's are first cousins. frontotemporal dementias are very, very aggressive dementias because the person is so young. And I can't see what number 5 says, Glenda, because now the screen is no different. Most dementias are not hereditary. Is that what this says?
Yes.
Yeah, most of the frontotemporal dementias are considered sporadic dementias that we do not understand, and they're not considered to be things that would be hereditary and would be passed down to the children. Okay. All right, so now everybody's probably depressed.
Oh, I am. How often
Okay.
does this, how often, I know you say Alzheimer's is the most common, but where does this lie when we look at the dementias? As
This
far
is
as,
the fifth most common form of dementia. There are thought to be about 500,000 of these cases in the US.
no good news here at all.
No, it is devastating for the families. These are folks that we really, really have to support and be prepared to support preteens, teens, and young adults as they go through a parent who's dying. And the hard, I think, especially difficult part for them is they don't have friends who are going through this, just due to the rarity of it. So it's critical that you get in the support groups, and you can go to the FTD website and find a support group. There are also folks that do specific FTD support groups as well. Look at the Area Agency on Aging in your area to find support groups. And then the FTD website, I believe they list all the FTD websites they're aware of. You can also be in the national support group. And then there's lots of stuff you can find on YouTube that come from the University of California, San Francisco. So UCSF and then space FTD, you'll get everything from a 30-second tutorial on language to a 3-hour mini medical conference. So you can find a lot of information, but it's critical that the first thing you do is identify which FTD your person has. Now, on your staging tool, you first find which FTD does your person have, and then follow it down that column. If there is an X in the column, then the behavior on the left-hand side is associated with that form of FTD. And if you're seeing that behavior in your loved one, block the column out. Go all the way through until you no longer see the behaviors in your loved one. Remember, I grade harder. I'm usually a half a stage in front of you. Have a friend look at it, then draw a line and date it. Come back every 2 months and check your staging tool again, and that will give you an idea of how quickly your loved one is progressing. And remember, by stage 5, you should be looking at memory care or a nursing home skilled facility for care. Okay.
And that document that she's talking about, the staging tool, will be sent out to you if you register for this call in a couple of days. So you will receive that in your hand. And Tam is always available for questions, and I'll put up her phone number, etc., a little bit later. So are you ready to see if we have questions, comments, Tam?
Sure.
Okay, if you have a question, a comment, a concern, your person you're caring for has what you think is FTD, you can put something in the chat box. You can unmute your phone with *6, or you can unmute your microphone if you're with us on Zoom, and I will call on you by your name. Lots of ways to ask a question here. Like I said, there's no good news in all of this. I've heard you do a lot of presentations. This is the first time I've heard this topic in such detail, and it's pretty bad. Maria, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, so how common are deliriums or hallucinations if this was the main diagnosis on a patient in later stages?
How common are hallucinations in frontotemporal dementias?
Yes, are they present?
They're not.
Okay.
They're usually not reported.
Okay.
It's not something that we see. Hallucinations are very much looked at as being a Lewy body thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, delusions are beliefs that are not real. So everybody with dementia eventually has beliefs that are not real because of brain damage. I don't remember why you took my car. I don't remember why I can't find my purse. It's not that you stole it, it's that I put it somewhere. And so that's a delusion. But in terms of hallucinations, we would think Lewy body or Parkinson's first.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Maria. Everybody's saying a lot of good information. It was good information, but it sure was depressing. If you want to reach,
Glenda, this one and Huntington's are just horrible. They really are. If you could rank them in terms of horror, it's those two sets. They are horrible dementias. Just devastating. So the website that Glenda put up for you, the PPA and the THEA, FTD.org, those are the best websites in the world. That's where I send every family to. Because most of the time, Glenda, I made a family, they don't know that there are different forms of FTD, and you really need to know which one you're dealing with. And then also that information helps you help your kids, helps grandkids, help other family members understand. And they're really having devastating things happen to their brains. So, and remember, they have a lot of falls. This is considered one of our highest fall group because of damage in the frontal lobe. They tend to walk bent at the waist, and then they're way out of balance. They have a lot of head strikes daily. So it is devastating. It is extremely difficult for families to visit because it is truly a very difficult dementia.
And you were talking about, I mean, you showed us all the brain scans and the slides and all that. Is this one easier though to diagnose than some of the others?
It's actually fairly easy to diagnose, even though you see people getting diagnosed with alcoholism first. It's usually easy to diagnose because the doctor is shocked to see someone of such a young age.
So they aren't thinking in those terms when they're looking at somebody.
Right. They're looking at them thinking this is totally not normal. I need to send you somewhere else. And so this person tends to end up at a neurologist much faster than a person in the 70s or 80s or 90s would end up because of ageism. You know, Glenda, as you get old, you're going to lose your mind. And that's not actually true. This person gets diagnosed much faster because they're younger, and this is an unusual presentation.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, this one has really thrown me for a loop.
Okay. Well,
I'm going to breathe.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. If you want to get in touch with Tam, and she does accept calls, you can reach her, and I put it in the chat box. But for those of you on the telephone, you can reach her at area code 254-216-3668. If she doesn't answer, leave her a detailed message and she will get back with you. If you choose to email her, she doesn't answer emails, I'll tell you that right now, but it's tam@tamcummings.com. But you can leave her a message there and include your phone number. Yeah, include your phone number and she will get back with you. She's dedicated to helping caregivers that are dealing with these situations, and so feel free to get in touch with her. You will be receiving, as I said, in a few days, a follow-up email, and in that email we will have the tool, the staging tool that Tam had talked about. You can always go back and watch this presentation again as a podcast on the Caregiver Teleconnection website. And this is one of those that I think it would be good to watch it again because there's so much detail included in this presentation. We have about 3 minutes. If anyone else has a question or a comment, if you're on your phone, you can press *6 on your phone and just put something in chat box, raise your hand. Tam, are you going to share your PowerPoint presentation with us so we can share it, or?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so we'll send that out also in the follow-up email. So you'll have all this information to go over again at your leisure. Anyone with a question or a comment, a concern? Are you dealing with someone that you think has an FTD? Should have said dealing. I should say caring for.
Very tough.
Okay, thank you, Tam.
Okay, thank y'all. Everybody take care of yourselves. Stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated for sure if you're in a hot area for sure. Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
joining us today, and we hope to hear you on future sessions and see your face on future sessions too. It's been our pleasure to be with you today, and we're certainly grateful you've been with us. So bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.